right of the people, baby.
To truly choose to love is heroic.
Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people. And we're going to have to put it back in the hands of the people.
It takes the willingness to stand by and do what has to be done when it has to be done.
What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Off The Shelf Bookclub. I am Jermaine.
And I'm Jesselyn.
And welcome to episode 5. Episode 5. We're going to be going over section 4, chapters
9 through 11.
9 through 11. And first, we are going to get started with our land acknowledgement.
The Off The Shelf Book Club wants to offer our utmost respect to those who came before us on this land. It is important that we protect and acknowledge the history of the indigenous people of America. Minnesota Makoche, which means the land of the water that reflects the sky, is the homeland of the Dakota and Anishinaabe people. Minnesota, in its history, has taken a part in the genocide of Native people and multiple treaties that stripped them from their homelands. Where Off The Shelf Book Club resides is home of the Midewiwin people, which means dwellers of the Spirit Lake. Off The Shelf Book Club will do whatever we can to honor the Native people and their lands and do what we can to aid in land back.
All right, so, and we're going to start getting into our section 4, episode 5, yes. Chapters 9 and 11. So, 9 through 11. So, what are your starting thoughts on it?
I found, I think this section in these chapters particularly interesting because it started to really dive into different ideas that we have around color specifically, and kind of really like unpacking colorism and unpacking kind of like this black and white outlook that we sometimes tend to kind of jump into when we think about race, and he talks about it through his own experience, how like all of a sudden he just like started like extremely hating white people.
Yeah.
He's like, well, that doesn't really do any good for us at all, right? And the vice versa, like, space. And so I thought that was just a interesting look and perspective on things. And I think, it shows, I think you can see, some parallels from the 2000s, which is when he was in college, and now in 2026. And I think you can see some differences as well, because things just weren't as what they used to be, right? Things have I don't want to say necessarily evolved. I guess evolved can be good and bad, but just how things kind of developed over time.
Yeah. And I think that it's personally, it was a good way to look introspective. You know, just look into some of my actions in the past. And, I've always been, sort of a woke person. But there was a point where that wokeness took a step up a notch, where you realize, this is, there's truly a game being played within our faces. And then I think naturally, a natural human thing to do is to go to that when you're being met with hate, to meet back with hate. And I think it's a natural human thing that we don't talk about enough. And if we start talking about it, I think it'll lead to more healing and reconciliation, because people can relate in other ways other than just by race to being met with hate. Like women having to live in a society with men, and so many women are attacked by men sexually, physically, or mentally, emotionally, in all these different ways, and they have to live in a society with us still.
Right.
So learning how to like live within a society within hate, and also try to create a better world and educate people and also educate yourself. I think that that's the first step. So I don't, because I personally went through a point where it's like damn, it is like white people have been not all white people, but white people have been at the head of a lot of atrocities for black or just people of color, period. And we have to learn to separate the fact that, yes, there were white faces that were doing that, but it wasn't like all of white people that existed that did those things. They may have perpetuated those ideas, but they were also, like he brought it up in a way, like they are also victims of the system, the game that has been being played in our face this whole time. And that is a more recent discovery I feel like I personally have had. I feel like it's over the past like year and a half, maybe two, where like I've went through that and I had to realize like, oh yeah, there is a bit of sense of class. Like there is a class war.
Yeah.
Along with, a race war too within America. And it's always been there, but like class is almost the thing lurking above it too.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that this section covered that very well.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Yeah. I think like classism in specific and the class divide is really like the overall like arching like kind of like umbrella and cloud, right, that then causes all the other different divides, whether it's on race, whether it's on gender, etc. Because like it's almost like that's what it was kind of built to do in a way, at least here in America, where like there is a bigger problem, and that's what this bigger problem is. It's the classism, which I know we'll talk a little bit more about like later, but I think sometimes, like I think a lot of times we tend to forget that because we're stuck in the smaller things such as race. I don't want to necessarily call it like smaller because I think it is a big thing, because I think America has embodied a racial divide.
Yeah.
And so there's that, but like I think at the end of the day, right, if we can get past this class divide, there's actually a lot of work that we could do. That's where the biggest issue is.
And something that he brought up was anti-racist empathy. And I think that something that can help a lot of people get there, even our people of color, get to class solidarity and healing of a lot of our racial tensions in America, is admitting the class first. Because then you realize like, oh, so the same struggles that I go through, they go through too. It's just the reason why I'm going through it might be a little bit different, and the circumstances of why I'm going through it might be a little bit different because of the game that is being played on us. But it's still the same person playing it. It's still the same person controlling the board. And once we I think that it's a lot easier to become empathetic to everyone's struggle when you start looking at it through that perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
gaining empathy, anti-racist empathy, and even class empathy. You know, loving your neighbor.
Right.
It's kind of where it starts.
Mm-hmm.
But starting to jump into chapter 9, color. The question is, how can we broaden and extend beauty standards? Yeah, and do you have any starting thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the question came mainly from like page 108 as he starts to talk about one of his friends at FAMU and how like he makes this like comparison, right, between him and his friend, and in particularly like they're talking about like eye color.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the third paragraph, and he talks about his friend Clarence, how his hazelnut skin matches hazel eyes, an eye color that is rare for anyone around the world, but most commonly found among people of Southern and Eastern European heritage, not African Americans. When I first saw his lighter eyes, as I assumed they were fake, it turned out his genes provided him what I had to buy. Mm-hmm. And so like he talks about him, right, like you get the assumption, right, that he's clearly wearing colored contacts, and like I believe that was something that was really common up until probably even a little bit past the like throughout the 2000s, and probably like a little bit past there too, right into the 2010s, where doing stuff like that, wearing color contacts, I think it's always been a trend. I think it has moved differently now throughout the years on how that looks. I think people start to wear them, that color contacts, more now that like just are non-realistic, where at one point it was clearly you're trying to push a certain beauty standard that is typically of European standard. And he also like starts to get more and more into just kind of like talking about different beauty standards, and he talks about like bleaching behaviors that are very common and things of that nature. And it's just like, when we think of beauty standards in America, and even in general, like history of beauty standards is an interesting idea, because it wasn't always like extremely thin, like even in that regards, right? At one point in time, even in European standards, the thicker you were almost showed that you had money,
Right,
because you could eat, right, like in that type of space. And then all of a sudden it changed over time. But then even then, right, like that space is also consistent with certain spaces around the world, and like in Africa, like that is also a similar space and beauty standard as well. And the way that beauty standard, like, and the way that beauty standards have like went really exclusive to kind of widening its horizons a little bit, where we started to see a little bit more acceptance, and whether it was the fact that you were just a little bit like thicker, you know, like more tan skin, things like that, like it started to widen a little bit. But as of recently, we took like what was seen as like, you could say, some progress, like we just all of a sudden just like decided to almost like erase that progress, I would say, within the last like couple years.
Yeah.
And I think this, like right now and particularly, it's like, what the hell is going on?
I think that part of the reason why, which is a kind of a different conversation, capitalism has everything to do with everything. Mm-hmm. But I think that that's like a huge reason why we started taking steps back is because where our pockets were going now, like we were really benefiting and profiting off of inclusivity and diversity at a point. And then America found a way again to learn to segregate people and to put labels on people. And now you see, like, when it was the Super Bowl, what were half the fucking commercials? Ozempic and dietary pills. And not along with a gym membership, not along with healthy foods.
That one is just, I don't even.
Like, it's all part of the capitalistic, like, what is popping right now? What can we make the most money off of right now? And, like, for example, Lizzo was one of the biggest artists at that time. Mm-hmm. Which she was one of the pioneers in the music and entertainment industry with body positivity to the extent that she was. Like, I feel like every public appearance she made, she was making some type of body positivity statement, and there was some real money within that, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And now there is money within, especially when you see who's in power. I mean, you look at the fucking Mike Tyson commercial.
Fat and nasty.
I was so fat and nasty.
That shit was.
I was 300 pounds.
Actually, eat ice cream every day.
Every night.
Or every hour, was it?
Something like that.
That shit was actually ridiculous.
We should not make fun of people with lists.
No, we shouldn't.
But that was stupid.
But it was making fun of Mike Tyson specifically, not people with lisps.
Maybe we shouldn't make fun of Mike Tyson either. That nigga he's still clearly active.
Knock our shit out. I need to
still
take
active.
that clip. We need to take that shit out for real.
Right. Cut. And action. Yeah, but I think that it's like there was something that I think how we can broaden and extend beauty standards is I think that these two paragraphs here just kind of shows you the true irony within all of these, like, specifically colorist standards. Mm-hmm. And it's like depressing how ironic it is, and so on page 119 we got these two paragraphs. It says, by then singer Michael Jackson had paved the skin bleaching boulevard, traveled by rapper Lil Kim, baseball player Sammy Sosa, and so many more. Skin bleaching products were raking in millions for U.S. companies. In India, fairness creams topped 200 million in 2014. Today, skin lighteners are used by 70% of women in Nigeria, 35% in South Africa, 59% in Togo, and 40% in China, Malaysia, and in the Philippines and South Korea. Some white people have their own skincare addiction to reach a post-racial ideal. Tanning. In 2016, the United States elected the Orange Man, as Nene Leakes calls Trump, who reportedly uses a tanning bed every morning. Trump, the same dude who wants to kick out all the brown people in this country, is the one who's killing himself slowly to make sure he stays somewhat brown.
I don't even think he uses a tanning bed because that shit don't even look like
it looks like
bed.
Spray tan.
It looks like that nigga's rubbing like literally like orange dye on
I swear to God.
His skin.
But he uses a tanning bed every morning. Paradoxically, Some tanning white people look down on bleaching black people, as if there's a difference. Surveys show that people consider tan skin the replica color of light people, more attractive than naturally pale skin and dark skin. And I just find it like so ironic, because you remember, what was it, Snow White, mirror mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all, and what fair meant was white, pale,
White as snow, to be specific.
white as snow, for real. And that is the point. And like, y'all, we're sitting here on both sides of the table. It's like, on one side, I have more empathy, which might be an issue, maybe not, but I have more empathy with the people who are bleaching their skin than the people who are tanning, because not necessarily the average everyday person is creating these ideas and shit like that, but they perpetuate them and then turn around and try to make it the trend. And we are trying to assimilate to them.
Right.
It's just, I'm more empathetic with.
There's a space of like, almost like a space of cultural appropriation, and then a space of trying to fit in. But the reality is that both sides are trying to fit into something. I think that's for that. Like, you can say, but it's also like, I think, more complicated than that, because we're also talking about a system that was created by white people that pushes that. I do think, though, like, the change in beauty standards comes from not necessarily that capitalism can't profit off of it, because they can, and they can very well. There's way too many people asking for inclusivity to not be able to profit off of it. And why wouldn't you profit off of something that the majority of Americans can actually buy and purchase? Because everybody wants to talk about how we bigger. Well, if you provide that for us, then we can actually buy the things, right? For example. But like, I think, like, and it's not that, I think that there is a rise in conservatism that pushed it, not in the sense of like a problem was solved and it came back, the problem came back. It's not what I'm saying, because the problem was always there to begin with. It never necessarily left. But I think there was a space where, and he talks about this earlier in the book, where there was this post-racial idea when, like, Obama became president. And I think that there was a space where we talk about, like, beauty standards, that somewhat existed as well.
Oh, yeah.
And that pushed that inclusivity a little bit more. And it wasn't, like, perfect, because right here, right, we're talking about right in the 2000s, right, we're really just talking about lighter skinned people with the color of skin that looks like ours, that are looked at as the best, right? We still aren't showing inclusivity for darker skinned people. Right? And so that is still missing. That's always been missing. But there's, like, what could have been, all of a sudden we just had to backtrack. It was almost as if, like, we were going to get there. And they were like, no. We're not going to do that. And I think there's also a reality to that space where, like, where the capitalism comes in, where it's like they're going to buy your shit anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why it's so important that people do the work to stop going to places that aren't going to actually, like, push what you want. Stop going to fucking Target.
Mm-hmm. It ain't gonna benefit
We
you.
live in Minnesota. There's a Target on every corner. All you gotta do is stop going.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't offer something, or they stopped offering something that was pretty important. I think, like, had a lot of value. We were pulling in a lot of money, and they chose to get rid of it when they saw the opportunity. And a big part of that is because they were like, we're gonna come here fucking anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Because the trend of Target in itself. But if you stop, then that forces them to realize that they actually can't just not give a fuck about the vast majority of people.
Exactly. I mean, we gotta learn in a capitalistic society what makes it go round. If the stock market crashes, people think it's the end of the world. So what do? You make that stock crash if you want it to do something different. There's no other, like, I feel like that's...
with that GameStop stuff that happened
Truly.
some years back, where people started buying the stocks in GameStop because they were really low, and something was happening. I think that they were closing down or something.
Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, boom. And I mean, there's a lot more to that, but it's just knowing the actual power within your money. Like, when we live in a capitalistic society, no matter which way you look at it, and money is what keeps it going. It's the fuel of this world. So you can't act like it doesn't have the power that it does. Point blank, period. And there's more to that conversation, I think, with capitalism. I want to talk on more later on, but I think we should move on to our next question in chapter 9. Or is there anything else that you wanted to say?
There's one thing I wanted to say quick. I think that we're also just talking about the next question already a little bit. I think that the biggest thing, like, with both of these questions is, one, right? We need to start using our money correctly, start putting it in places that are actually going to properly, like, support us as people and as, like, Americans in particularly. Like, if Victoria's Secret isn't going to show dark-skinned people and are only going to show, like, sickly thin people, that does not show the vast majority of America, we shouldn't be putting our money there. We shouldn't be buying things from there. Not to mention, they use prison labor, which is slave labor, right? To make their clothes. Or they used to, that's for sure, right? I don't know if it is anymore, but they certainly used to. We shouldn't be buying stuff from them. And I think that, like, that is also, like, that's a way on how we extend beauty standards, but also, like, we need to genuinely understand in terms of colorist behaviors that there is, to an extent, colorism can go both ways. Mm-hmm. That there can be like, people can look down on lighter skinned people. People can also look down on darker skinned people. With that being said, colorism affects darker skinned people the most.
Yeah.
Because lighter skinned people are often looked at as a better option or as a better beauty standard. And so with that, we need to understand the fact that when we talk about colorism, or like when this idea of colorism comes up, or when things come up, is that it's gonna negatively like affect darker skinned people, and we make sure that we're not like attacking darker skinned people. We're not falling into things that negatively affect darker skinned people. That doesn't mean that you can't have a space where you can talk about how colorism negatively affects you as lighter skin. It just means that you also have to understand that there are just people that are affected more.
Yeah, and then also being willing to take that on the chin and be like, yeah, that's true. Let me take that and learn from that. Not take it as, don't get defensive when someone says like, yo, this is how I am affected by this situation. Just take it as that. Yeah, I don't really think that there needs to be an argument.
Right.
Because if you're trying to be an ally, it just needs to be like, I hear you and I'm validating your feelings, and learn more and having more conversations about that.
Right.
Also, it's just like remembering like that our elders and ancestors who have helped us on this road to liberation, they've come in all different shades, and that's just important to remember. Like, there have been our lighter activists, and there's been our darker activists, and they've all have done immense amount of work for us, and their skin tone didn't change the fact of what they did.
Right. It's also acknowledging the fact that a lot of times our darker skin activists go unseen, right? We all talk about Rosa Parks all the time. We forget to mention that what she did was an entire movement that started with a dark-skinned 15-year-old girl.
Mm-hmm.
And when Rosa Parks did what she did, it was in protest of what happened to her, right?
Right.
So, like, sometimes, right, those things go unnoticed. We just got to remember that, like, we just got to remember those things.
Yeah, there's actually one more thing I wanted to add on to our colors conversation. I think it's a behavior that we have to ensure that we don't continue to push. Here, it's on page 115. Okay, cool. So I think that here's one thing that it's paragraph 3. Yeah, it's like paragraph 3-ish. On page 115. Enslavers' public racist ideas sometimes clash with their private racist ideas, which typically described light women as smarter, kinder, gentler, and more beautiful than dark women. Slaveholders paid much more for enslaved light females for their dark counterparts from long before the United States even existed until long after American slavery ended. White men cast these yeller girls and Jezebels as seductresses, unable to admit their centuries of attempted and actual rape. And I think that once we start like looking at our children as children and stop speaking with words like Jezebel, fast, thought, hoe, words like that. Mm-hmm. Once we start looking at our children as fucking children and not adultifying them, especially the darker the child is, that will help ensure that we're not, falling into these colorist behaviors. Like, a kid's age is a kid's age. It's not how dark they are. Like, and like how people talked about Trayvon Martin when that was a boy. Mm-hmm. He was a teenager. And never grew up past that. Never got to learn more than that. And the way that people talk about him still to this day, or when it first happened, it wasn't a boy that we were looking at. It wasn't. That was a grown man that they were talking about. I mean, the fact that they talked about how George Zimmerman was getting overpowered by him. And I remember, like, a really traumatic, I think, point in my life was when I remember watching the Trayvon Martin trial, and they were playing that evidence over and over and over again of a 911 call, and you hear a little boy fucking crying in the back. And they tried to say it was George Zimmerman. And that's a perfect example of colorism. George Zimmerman was a full-blown, pretty sure he was maybe Hispanic of some sort.
Yeah, I think so.
He was Hispanic. Lighter skin. And they wanted to believe that grown-ass man, George Zimmerman, was the one screaming and crying like that. Not the boy. And we just gotta look at our children as children. We ain't talking about them over sexualizing them too young. We're not adultifying them too young. We are letting them be kids. Let them make mistakes. Let them learn from it. Guide them. But don't subject them to the world's bullshit already before they even had a chance to even get to know the world.
Mm-hmm. For chapter 10, which is the title is White. Our first question is, how can we be more productive with voting and helping people get access to voting? So, like, in the beginning of the book, or not the book, the chapter, around, well, he talks about it all through, but specifically, I want to talk about, like, page 24 and 25.
124 and 125.
Yeah. He talks about polling and the registration to vote, and he said Florida purged 58,000 alleged felons from the voting rolls. Black people were only 11% of registered voters, but comprised 44% of the purge list. And about 12,000 of those people purged were not actually convicted felons. Which, in that space, right, is just like a crazy representation of taxation without representation. Not to mention the fact that, felons can't vote is completely absurd in itself. But that's that whole slavery aspect, right? The idea that being a slave means that you're less of a person, which means you don't gain any, you don't have the same rights as people. But then he also talks about, over on page 125, he starts to talk about how he and his friends and just people in general started shaming non-voters. And he says, I participated in this foolish hunt. One seems to reoccur every time an election is lost. The shaming ignores the real source of our loss and heartbreak. The fact it was that Black people delivered enough voters to win, but those voters were sent home or their votes spoiled. Racist ideas often lead to this silly psychological inversion where we blame the victimized race for their own victimization. And then he later says in that second paragraph, white Democrats stood aside, and I think I specifically want to take this and just say Democrats as a whole stood aside and let Bush steal the presidency on the strength of destroyed Black votes. I was shot back into the binary thinking of Sunday school, where I was taught about good and evil, God and the devil. And so this question really stems from this is such a reoccurring occurrence, right? We can talk about the election that was just lost, right, with Kamala Harris, and how we all of a sudden like are fighting with each other with quote unquote non-voters or voters that voted third party, when there is a reality that like those votes weren't gonna make her win.
Right.
Not to mention that there is like a reality and like that even though she was handed a shitty hand and not given what she needed to properly have at least some kind of fairish race, because Joe Biden wanted to take so damn long to actually remove himself from the race that he should have never joined to begin with.
Fucking dumbass.
That she just didn't do what needed to be done. She was asked to do certain things that she refused to deliver.
Because Democrats don't have a spine.
And instead thought that if they moved more right and more center, that would gain votes. I don't know how many times people have to tell Democrats in particularly that that's not how you're gonna win. But that's not how you're gonna win. But that's not fault of necessarily non-voters / voters of third parties.
No.
Because the reality is that we're allowing these politicians to give us shitty hands.
And not creating our own hands.
And like he points out specifically in Florida, like they are literally being like attacked in a way, right? That's purging their votes. That's restricting them because of how awful, right, their voting stations are set up, where people are waiting in line for hours with no water, no food, can't even be offered it. Where they have to be turned home because they didn't make it in time in there. Like, and so like that's where some of the non-voters fall in a lot of these states, especially that are in the South, that have these gerrymandering
fuck Texas, bro.
Spaces and all of that stuff. So rather than shaming people for not voting or voting third party, I think that it's important that, one, we need to like start holding politicians accountable. I feel like we say this every episode, but it's the reality. Like, we just need to start doing it. And then we also need to like start realizing that our options should be more than the shitty hand that they give us. Like, I don't like how they tried to, or they're trying to scare people into not stepping up to the governor race in the more Democratic part of Minnesota. I can't remember who said it, but somebody was like, I wouldn't go up there and run against Amy Klobuchar. Why the hell not? Fuck that bitch.
Right.
I don't want her there.
Right. And all it takes is one person. It literally just takes one person to decide, like, yo, I'm not gonna. And you're lucky that I can't. You're just lucky that I can right now. Because on God, Amy Klobuchar, you would not have no spot. The only thing holding me back is age. And we can't sit here and have any more fucking excuses about it. Like, at the end of the day, these motherfuckers ain't got no spine. So what do you think is when they let these things slide right now? Like, every motherfucker everybody who is in Congress, Senate, whatever, tally these damn names down, because they're the ones letting this shit slide. Tally their fucking names right now. The fact that the SAVE Act is that what it's called, with the voter identification shit?
Yeah.
That, which is anti-democracy, point blank, period. They allowed that shit to happen. And it's not only just going to affect the criminals, they said, or the fraudsters, quote unquote, they said where it was going to affect. No, it's mainly going to affect the women, immigrants, people of color. They are going to, like, and that's the people that we need to hear from the most. Like, they're the ones being affected by the policy the most every fucking time. So why are we silencing their voice? Because we know that they would fucking do what's right. And we continue to let these motherfuckers decide who's going to be the one in office. At the end of the day, if it was really up to me, Kamala Harris wouldn't have been on that ballot. Joe Biden wouldn't have been on that ballot. Fucking none of them motherfuckers that were even... Gavin Newsom would definitely not be on our upcoming ballot.
That one just pisses me off because I need us to be really for real right now. We have so much time.
Y'all niggas...
So much time.
Y'all act like y'all care about people, right? You want to act like you care about people. And this motherfucker Gavin Newsom sat here himself and was like proud to be one of the first people to help destroy a homeless or houseless encampment. Be fucking for real. And that's the nigga that y'all want running the damn country? The fuck? The fuck? The fuck is wrong with you? This is not... No, he is not... We gotta stop settling. The fuck is y'all doing? There is a nigga like Zoran Memdani out there doing shit in New York. And we should settle for a dumb fuck like Gavin Newsom?
Not to mention, we got so much time. We
Plenty
have so
time.
much time to find somebody better. We already just trying to settle. It's ridiculous.
I'm not gonna lie. It's like trying to work with the Democratic Party is like your friend that sits here and keeps on going back to that man or to that girl that sits here and keeps on fucking with them. That breaks their heart every time. It's playing with their feelings, playing with their emotions, but they keep on going back to them. And at some point, you just gotta be like, you know what? You just go sit in your shitty party. You guys, you go enjoy that shittiness together. I'm going to go build something over here, and it's going to be better, stronger, healthier, and better for the overall life of everybody. But no, we sit here and we want to stay with the nasty ex.
Mm-hmm.
It's just annoying.
Yeah.
Y'all mad at you can't be mad at third party voters because at least they're taking the chance to vote other than the fucking one or two.
Realize that there's multiple options. Now, third party
Not
candidates need to get their shit together too. I think that's another story. I feel like that's a
what's her name?
Conversation for another time. Jill Stein.
Yeah, I thought it was Jill Stein. Yeah. But yeah.
I think that like also another thing is like rather than just shaming them, you need to also like figure out ways to help them out. Make sure that they get into that voting booth.
Mm-hmm.
How do we ensure that people are getting into that voting booth?
Mm-hmm.
How can we care for people that are sitting, waiting in line to ensure that they get into that voting booth? Rather than just shaming, ridiculing people, and all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and somebody said this, and I believe their TikTok name is Crutches and Spice, right? She's a disability activist on TikTok when the presidential election came around. At the end of the day, right? You can say whatever you want to somebody, but it's them and their thoughts in that voting booth at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So maybe we shouldn't be fucking jackasses to everybody in terms of voting.
Yeah.
We should be leaving people with thoughts that genuinely help them make the best decision. Because at the end of the day, it is them in that voting booth with their thoughts that are going to determine what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And being a jackass towards somebody is certainly not going to get them to vote the way that you want.
Mm-hmm. And kind of piggybacking off that and answering this next question of how would society look if we no longer centered white people. And my answer to that, along with like getting people out there to vote and vote in their favor, is on page 129. Okay, so to be anti-racist this is 129, the first paragraph. To be anti-racist is to see ordinary white people as the frequent victimizers of people of color and the frequent victims of racist power. Donald Trump's economic policies are geared towards enriching white male power, but at the expense of most of his white male followers, along with the rest of us. We must discern the difference between racist power and racist policymakers and white people. For decades, racist powers contributed to stagnating wages, destroying unions, blah, 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 blah. You get what I'm talking about. And then white people, white economic inequality, for instance, soared to the point that the so-called 99 percenters occupied Wall Street in 2011, and Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders ran a popular presidential campaign against the billionaire class in 2016. And something that I just want to get it across is I think that, like I said earlier, is I think if we get to the point where we get anti-racist empathy along with class empathy, we will begin to realize that Donald Trump and people like him are trying to convince you that people of color and quote unquote criminals are the ones that are raining on your parade. They want to continue to make you think that they're the ones raining on your parade, but if you just look up in the sky, you'll see that it's those billionaire fucks that are pissing on your parade. And it is not rain. It's like we have to look at it like that. Mm-hmm. And once that is accepted, then we can move forward and we can determine like, yeah, okay, well, if he's not voting for, if all the policies that he's going to be pushing aren't actually going to help me like Donald Trump is going to do, none of his policies will affect the average everyday American. I can't think of one thing he's done so far that has. And we're going to continue to live in a world, if we don't accept those facts, live in a world of bullshit and lies. And someone trying to convince you that what they're feeding you isn't bullshit, but you got a nose, dog.
I think the biggest thing about that is not that, right, white people don't matter. We're just throwing them away. It just means that the systems no longer only benefit white people. It means that everybody is benefited from that. Every single person gets benefited from the systems that are in place, because every single person is centered. And my thing here is, if that is such an issue to you, why? Why is it an issue that people can actually, like, that all people are being helped, are being provided a better life, are actually being cared for? Why is that such a problem to you, that everybody, including yourself, are being helped and being cared for? Why? Why is that such an issue to you? Why do you feel that people need to struggle? Why do you think that people need to struggle? Why is it that like, why is it so hard for you to envision that there can actually be a world out here, a country out here that actually provides care for all people that reside there? What is making it hard to see that that is an actual possibility?
I think it's like sick almost that some people are willing to sell themselves out in order to make sure that these other people are below me. As long as I know that they're below me, it's okay. And like an example of anti-racist policy that I think is one of my favorite bills that ever was passed. Thankfully, we live in Minnesota, is the North Star Act. And overall, you can just say that it helps damn near everybody. It doesn't matter. It's not based off of anything other than what you take home. And that's what, like, if we get to that point with every legislation that, like, race isn't the main factor in this, it's more about the other external factors that we have in this world, then we'll get into a better place. You know what I mean? But we first have to do the work of actually making sure that we are living in anti-racist policies to do that, you know, and creating those and voting for motherfuckers that are creating that. And not taking no for an answer from these politicians.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to move into chapter 11?
Yeah.
I feel like it's getting late.
Yeah.
All right, so chapter 11, we have, it's titled Black, and our first question is, how can we make it possible to not divide ourselves into inferior and superior? Do you have any initial thoughts on that one?
I think like that has to do a lot with what we've talked about just in general, is really like this entire time, right? We're talking about categories, right? Us putting ourselves into categories. And with that, I just think that it's important to like genuinely like sit here and ask yourself, why can't people just be like happy? Why can't people be why can't people have benefits? Why can't you have benefits, right? Because that's where a lot of that space comes from, right? And like, why is that such a problem for all of us to have like a better life? Mind you, this includes you. Why can't you have a better life? If you are sitting here thinking that you don't have one, or you could have a better life, why can't you not? Why can't it just be a standard for that? And I think that that's part of making that divide not exist anymore, is genuinely like internalizing those questions and asking yourself those things. Because the fact that we even divide ourselves into inferior and superior is just dumb in itself, when we could really all just benefit. Think we constantly put ourselves in a box of like, this is how our systems work, so we can't do that with the systems we have in place. Why on earth do we have to have these systems in place? Why can't we make new ones?
Right. Most of these systems have been in place since the world looked a lot different.
Why is it so hard to imagine that we can have new systems?
Yeah.
why don't you want new systems? Because new systems don't mean you don't get things that you benefit from this current systems that we have. Just means that everybody else gets to benefit too. Mm-hmm. And I think like that's where that space is.
Yeah. And I think that we have to also admit that, like, in order for us to make sure that we're not creating hierarchies, is admitting that there's inequities that still exist. Like, I just hate the idea that people act like, oh, all black people should have been pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, and it's their fault why they didn't do this and they didn't do that, and that's why, well, like, racist rhetoric, just bullshit rhetoric. But, like, there has always been these disparities between groups of race, right? Since before slavery, or during slavery, right? We'll see, use it from there. And then there were disparities there after the people were freed. There were disparities there. And then once they got, quote unquote, they got some civil rights, quote unquote. And then eventually the disparities still stayed there. Never left. And even after Jim Crow and all that bullshit, post-race era, the disparities were still there. So when the fuck did we take care of that? When the fuck did we actually right our wrongs? So then if we never corrected our bullshit behavior from the past and we continue to repeat it, then why are we blaming our brothers and sisters, our overall all the communities, for the people who fall victim to the system that did what it was supposed to do? We have to have empathy, because not everybody is going to be built to withstand the system. The system was built to do what it's supposed to do, and that's why people fall victim to it. Don't victim blame here.
It's funny because people who be talking about that people didn't pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Why you ain't pull yourself up by your bootstraps?
Right.
It's because there's no bootstraps to pull up. It's the whole point. Them shits don't actually exist. Mm-hmm. You talking all that crap, but the reality is you in the same boat. And that's what a lot of the times that's the reality of that situation. Of course, that there are people that are in better positions that say that, but there are a lot of people who aren't. We all in the same boat. You want to know why? Maybe you should ask why.
Mm-hmm. And I think that this kind of leads us into the second question, too, of, like, how people of color and black people have limited systemic power, and how can we start holding the ones in positions accountable when they don't implement anti-racist policies. Is that we just got to start calling it as it is. Like, when we have motherfuckers out here who said, oh, I didn't made it this far, so if you could do it, or if I could do it, you can do it. Well, did you have the same exact circumstances as this person that ain't in the position as you are? Clearly, y'all did not have the same circumstances. And even people who grew up in the same household grow up differently and come out differently. So for us to literally be holding it against our people to sit here and be like, oh, y'all should have been rich, like y'all should be already creating generational wealth, when at the reality is that there are majority of white people out here who don't have generational wealth because of the system at play. So if the system was made for us to specifically not get it, and we're still trying to thrive as much as we can, why are we at fault? When there's white people out here who ain't got generational wealth, rightfully so, because there's a system at here. There's a system at play. And everybody's a victim here. Everybody's a victim. And we got to start looking at, like, I don't know. I looked at racist black people differently now, and like we can't consider black people powerless. They're just people of color powerless, and that's what makes them. They can't be racist. They can only be racially prejudiced. That's just a bunch of bullshit. Because my nigga Coons from the Uncle Toms and Coons have from the start of time done some of the most damage to us. You've seen what they fucking did to the Black Panther Party. You've seen what COINTELPRO did, and what they did was they found Uncle Toms to use, and to an extent, hot take and a conversation that we gotta have at some point is that we can't even blame necessarily a lot of our Uncle Toms, because this is all they knew, and they were trying to survive.
I think, like, and a lot of people don't like this. A lot of people aren't going to like this at all. That's the reality, is that when we get into that level of power, we have limited power. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But it's there.
Mm-hmm. Like, and we like the power trip.
On the, like, at the bottom of 141, when a black man stepped into the most powerful office in the world in 2009, his policies were often excused by apologists who said he didn't have executive power. You know how crazy that sounds?
Fucking wild. Like
he holds like the highest office in the country. Some people would even say the world, mm-hmm. right? But he ain't got no power. Mm-hmm. I think that's a little crazy. And that applies to all people. That applies to people beyond, like, who hold political offices. It also includes people like teachers. Beyonce and Jay-Z, who got billions of dollars.
Yeah.
They're not putting enough of their money towards people who actually need it. They putting their money there. You can acknowledge that. You can acknowledge that they're helping people and all those things. It's not enough though. Because why you got to be a billionaire? You don't.
100%. And we have to constantly criticize our people, our entertainers and celebrities and whatnot. But we also have to look inward too. Like, we have to truly look inward and like look at, like, we're not powerless. When we look at that, we look at, like, okay, yes, we have to understand and validate our feelings of being victims of this country and system, but then also we have to sit here and be like, empower ourselves. We have to empower ourselves. Like, if you are a teacher, you're not going to adultify your darker students. And if you're ACAB every fucking day, all day, fuck 12, they're all pigs. But if you're a fucking police officer, you're not going to sit here and you're not going to brutalize darker people, or just black people or people of color. You're not looking to brutalize people.
At least you shouldn't.
Right.
And if you are, you really need to look at it. As I was reading the evidence of things not seen, he said something, or James Baldwin had said something. He was like, this was something that was constantly said, specifically about black police officers.
I think he says it some, I know what you're going to say. He talks about it in here.
Where it's like, if you have to call the police, you better hope it's not a black man. Mm-hmm. And that you do what you can to make sure it's a black or a white police officer. Which is just so heartbreaking, because it shouldn't be that way. So it's really important that when we're in these spaces where we have limited power, to constantly check ourselves to make sure that we're doing what needs to be done for our people, for each other. Because that should have never been a saying at all. And that applies in different spaces, in all different kinds of spaces.
Exactly.
Who would you rather have in a workplace, a white man or a white woman? When that question came up, and a lot of people said white men, we're women. We shouldn't be at odds like that. We shouldn't have to be, but there's a reason we are. We gotta look, like, you gotta look inside as to why that is. Gotta check yourself. Make sure stuff like that isn't happening.
And to piggyback off what you were talking about with the white officers and black officers on page 147, it says, but reports immediately surfaced in the 1960s that black officers were as abusive as white officers. One report noted that in some places, low-income Negroes prefer white policemen because of the severe conduct of Negro officers. A 1966 study found that black officers were not as likely to be racist as whites, but a significant minority expressed anti-black racist ideas like, I'm telling you, these people are savages and they're real dirty. Or the black officer who said there have always been jobs for Negroes, but the fucking people are too stupid to go out and get an education. They all want the easy way out. And it's an example of Uncle Tom's power tripping, but also, like, it's another example here on page 145 and 146. When they're talking about one of the slave revolts back in the day in Charleston, South Carolina, Denmark, Vesey set the date of the revolt for July 14th, but the revolt had to remain a secret even from the slaves. Don't mention it to those waiting men who receive presents of old coats from their masters. Vesey's chief lieutenants told recruiters, they'll betray us. One recruiter did not listen and told the house slave Peter Prielu, who promptly told his master in May. By late June 1822, South Carolina enslavers had destroyed Vesey's army, which one estimated as high as 9,000 strong. Vesey was hung on July 2nd, 1822, remained defiant to the very end, and it's Uncle Tom's a dangerous man. They dangerous, and we have to, and that just shows the true, like, nigga, what else are you gonna call that? That's racist. That's racism. And there's no powerlessness within that. He was able to stop a whole slave revolt because he thought it would get him closer in proximity to whiteness. And I know y'all wouldn't look at a lot of your actions now today as that, but you think that you're much different than Peter, but a lot of y'all would have been Peter.
And that's not to say that, like, you don't go through extremely harsh work conditions. Like, I know and understand that, for example, that the people that do take up the police role create such a toxic and harmful environment for those who aren't white males. But that doesn't mean that you can't check yourself. Mm-hmm. Because, yeah, that also means that you got to prove yourself more. You got to make sure that, like, you know, right, the toxic and harmful environment, you have to try and make it somewhat, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I guess, the ability for you to actually do the job, right? Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean you can't check yourself, or you shouldn't check yourself, because you absolutely should. You shouldn't, like, nobody should be allowing these spaces to be like that. And the more people who push back, the better it's gonna get. And that's for all of them, whether you are a police officer and you're a woman or a person of color or both or queer or whatever, right? Or whether you're in, like, a political office and you're one of those things, right? Because those can produce similar environments. Like, you gotta check yourself. You have to, regardless of the environment that you're put in.
We can't keep on letting Barack Obamas and Jasmine Crockett's and Kamala Harris's and Ben Carson's and Clarence Thomas's and the countless amount of black officers who've partaked in the killing of unarmed black people in the streets, or just people of color, period, or anybody for that matter. And we can't act like how we've acted. Like, we sit here and we give Obama too much credit. Yeah, you were the first black president, but you did everything else a white president would have did.
I think that we also understand that things are complicated too. He did things that are positive.
It's complicated, but we also see how motherfuckers act like it is so hard to do these certain things, and there's a complicated system at hand, right? But if you believe in these certain things, and we see how like Donald Trump has taken advantage of the system at hand and pushing all these executive orders, if you believed in some of these things, like how Joe Biden was able to get, rightfully so because it was deserved, an Asian hate bill. He expedited that shit. COVID was going on and all that shit happened, and he was able to expedite that. That was an executive order. You made a decision. You made a stance, and you stood on it firm, and it affected people, and it affected people positively. So now we have to look at motherfuckers like like Barack Obama, like Jasmine Crockett, like all these other people who are in office, who were in office and who are in office, to higher standards. Cause fuck it, y'all should have been gave us some type of reparations. Y'all should have been created some type. Take out the reparations, because a lot of people are just gonna turn their heads to that. But there should have been, like, for example, clearly there should have been a black or African American hate bill created, because we have faced the most. Same with indigenous people.
Absolutely. I just think that there's a space where like you can acknowledge that there were things that were done well and there were things that were done horribly. He allowed racist policies to exist, right? Especially when we talk about like immigration, for example, right? He allowed those things to happen. He made them worse, matter of fact, right?
And he took part in colonialism.
And he should absolutely be critiqued in there. And I think there's a space, right, too, between that and Joe Biden, for example. Joe Biden is a white male. He has more systemic power that allows for that than Barack Obama did in the same office. And I think that's where that complexity comes from.
There's complexity within that, but also, like, I'm just tired of people. I think sometimes us as humans, we get lazy.
Absolutely.
And right now, I think this is an example of us getting lazy, of being like, yeah, it's hard, but we are literally seeing what this nigga Trump is doing and what he has been able to do. And I understand you could say, like, yes, he's also another white man. But again, you got up in that situation, and it doesn't. What we have learned is that it takes a little bit of time to get a motherfucker actually impeached. We know this from history. So if you sit there and you start doing some good shit for the people, and they start seeing the actual good benefits, then what? Now what? Now what? Sometimes you gotta take a risk and fucking jump, like this nigga's doing. But y'all are only willing to risk things and take jumps for whenever it lines your pockets. But I just don't think that I don't think that if we continue to move with the people that we do have, and move with people that have the same similar beliefs as them, we'll ever get away from it, because there's just too much money into the divide too. Because there's too much money in policing. There's too much money in the prison system. There's too much money in the housing. There's too much money in the NRA. There's too much money, like, with everything that... Yeah. We just got to start calling these motherfuckers out and start. We're not taking no for an answer. Motherfucker, pass that bill. Like, obviously, Jasmine Crockett doesn't have as much power, or that nigga Booker, the bald dude who's sitting there talking for 48, 24 hours, whatever it was. Like, we don't have they don't have that power. But when we have somebody in that president, they have the power. Create free college. You know what? You know what, Joe Biden? You know what you could have did? You or even Kamala. We are actually going to get rid of these student loans.
I think there's also because you're right? Like, you gotta take the jumps. You at least gotta try. Absolutely. And there's a space where like they do and they don't have the power, because I think sometimes that what we tend to forget, or not even tend to forget, we don't actually see. For example, Trump signs these hundreds of thousands, like low-key, I wouldn't be surprised if it's reached the thousands by now, right?
Get shot down.
Executive orders that get challenged and are reversed because they're unconstitutional, that we don't see, right? We never see the outcome of him doing these things. But we just see that he did them.
We see, though, that he's also done things and got things passed that were unconstitutional.
Yeah. Both can be true.
So what I'm saying is again, this nigga was able to throw shit at the fucking wall and keep on going. Why can't we just throw leftist shit at the wall and keep on going? Like social programs. Like that. Why can't we do that? Because we just don't hold these motherfuckers accountable. We sit there and we give Obama, Kamala, Joe Biden, all these motherfuckers, all these Democrats a little bit of leniency. No. Throw shit at the fucking wall. Throw shit at the wall. Social programs. I don't give a fuck about the Zionist programs that y'all are trying to fund and throw at the fucking wall. No. In Israel, they have all these social programs that we could fucking use.
Well, I'm not saying that isn't true. I just said that we should do that. I'm just allowing there to be a broader understanding of how our system works in the same aspects.
Yeah, I understand.
We gotta understand that, like, it's really important to also show that not everything is black and white, and that doesn't mean that we can't start throwing shit and like trying them out, seeing what happens.
I just think I'm not saying things are black and white. I'm just thinking that motherfuckers just aren't trying to even test out the other colors either. They're just kind of like, oh, whatever. We're just in this two-party binary system. It's either this or that. And it's quite literally exhausting.
Yeah.
But all right. Well, that has been episode 5. Thank y'all for joining in with us. We appreciate all of you. We would love to hear from you, whether in our comments, our social media DMs, or you can reach out into our emails. Let us know any advice that you have for us, any recommendations you have for books, or any ideas or opinions, statements that you want to make about some of the questions that we had or statements that we made. So yeah, we look forward to seeing y'all next week. And thank you for tuning in again. Don't forget to like, subscribe, check out all of our social medias. There will be a picture like right here. Right here. Probably like right there. With all of our social medias, our personal ones, and our book club ones. We appreciate all of you. Thank you again for tuning in. We wish you nothing but the best. Nothing but health and wealth and a peace of mind. Ashe.
Ashe.
I write it to people, baby.
To truly choose to love is heroic.
Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people. And we're going to have to put it back in the hands of the people.